Hello, my name's Rick, and a little over a year ago, I sold my business. That's Earl. Sold my business, and it was a small business, so I didn't make a ton of money. I'm not rich or anything. And I spent over the course of the last year working on my house. I had about 30 years of neglect going here, so there was a lot to do. But I still was able to find the time to about every week go out and do some adventuring around Colorado, and which is where I live. And hunting, fishing, four-wheeling, adventuring, just getting out there and moseying around. This year I decided I wanted to try to find something a little more structured. I was just kind of going every direction, and Durango and Silverton and Moab, and I was just going wherever the wind was blowing me. So I about a week ago I was working in my basement, like I said, 30 years of stuff, and I found an old tub, a Tupperware thing that apparently my mom many years ago, when she was moving to her new house, had thrown all my stuff in. There was like my letter from junior high school basketball. I was terrible at that. How I got a letter, I don't know. And there were letters from people from 40 years ago, and people that have passed and people that were close that I no longer know. So it was kind of emotional. It was pretty cool. And a lot of old pictures and things. And then I came across a book, and I remember this book from when I was a kid, and it was Jeep Trails to Colorado Ghost Towns. And I remember this book because I would look at all those old pictures and the ghost towns and the old Willie's Jeep this guy would drive around in to hit them, and I thought that looked so much fun. Dad had Jeeps. I can't say we went Jeeping very much, but a little, and it hooked me as far as visiting these great places off the beaten path. So I got to looking through the book. Here, let me grab it. Jeep Trails to Colorado Ghost Towns. And got to looking through this, and it occurred to me, I've got a Jeep, love photography, love history, and I can't say I'm very good at it, any of that, but it looked like fun. So what I was thinking about doing, and the author is Robert L. Brown. He was a historian in Denver, and so he went around and took pictures of ghost towns, and this was actually published in 1962. And so he took pictures in 1962 what these ghost towns looked like. And so then he's also got some pictures of the ghost town 100 years ago, 120 years ago. So I thought it'd be fun to follow his book and visit these places and try to recreate that same picture he took in 62. So hopefully we'd have pictures from 60 years ago and 100 years ago and see how it's changed. My suspicion is it's changed a lot in many of these areas, Aspen or Central City or Breckenridge, something like that. And kind of probably going to be a little depressing on some areas where it's got houses and it's private property. Others may be very well preserved and intact. Anyway, it looks like a lot of fun. I hope you join me on this excursion. It should be pretty cool. So let's get going. Well, it's springtime in Colorado, which means we're in our snowiest months. So although our author, Mr. Brown, goes through the ghost towns alphabetically, we're not gonna be able to do that because we've got probably 3 inches of new snow is all here, but in the high country where most of these towns are, feet of snow still up there. Most of them won't be open till late June, July, even sometimes late July at those 10 to 13,000 foot areas. So we're gonna start with our lower ones. And I think the first one we're gonna do is Bent's Stockade. You're familiar with Bent's Fort down by La Junta. And the Bent brothers William and Charles were working for the American Fur Trading Company back in the 1820s and 1830s. And they wandered through here, Colorado, the Front Range of Colorado, trapping. And I did like what the author quotes here, and it's President Zachary Taylor described the American Fur Trading Company in aggregate. They're the greatest scoundrels the world ever knew. So this was a rough bunch. And if you get down to Bent's Fort down by La Junta, you know, an old fur trapping Indian stopover on the Santa Fe Trail or a road to the Santa Fe Trail, just all sorts of history and crazy things went on in Bent's Fort back in the 1830s. But we're not talking about Bent's Fort. Apparently there was a previous one, Bent's Stockade. And Mr. Brown identifies it in between Colorado Springs off Highway 115, Colorado Springs and Pueblo, off Highway 115. And he's based that upon the research of another historian, C.W. Hurd of Los Angeles. But the interesting thing, the Bents selected this location, but they put it right in between the Ute tribe, which was the mountainous tribes, and the Arapahoes, which were more of a plains tribe. And those two weren't getting along at this particular time. So he put his fort right in the middle of no man's land, according to Mr. Brown here. And neither tribe, which is what they wanted to do, trade with the tribes, neither tribe would come into that no man's land because they didn't want to infringe upon the peace they had going with the other tribe currently. So the Bents gave it up. And then they went on and apparently wandered on down the Arkansas River and set up what we now know as Bent's Fort. So pretty cool. Kind of anxious to try to find this if we can and see what's left. So we're off to find Bent's original Stockade. South Colorado Springs, a few miles down 115, and then south of Highway 115. Anyway, on the road, it takes about an hour to get there. And we got Earl, of course, right there, Earl Scruggs. And we got a crack in the windshield, and I hate that. So, our road dead ends, or at least as far as I can go, into Fort Carson's training center. So we're right in the middle of where they live fire training exercises. Not right now, not where we're parked, but where Bent's original fort is. So that's an issue, obviously. So, but that's not where it ends. There's one more twist and turn to this saga for Bent's original fort. I did look it up on Google Earth, so I knew we weren't getting in. But there's more to this story. Robert Brown identified that area in photograph from a book by Mr. Hurd, and Mr. Hurd researched it and said, yes, that was Bent's Stockade. Well, once I couldn't get into Fort Carson, started digging around. Emailed back and forth from the Fort Carson archaeologist. And then I also found a 2009 environmental impact for Fort Carson. And they actually went in and researched the site in detail, archaeologically, architecturally, anthropologically, looked it over, and decided that, no, this was simply a late 1800s ranch. So, not Bent's Stockade. And actually the old, even contemporary, like 1850s, 1840s, had a hard time identifying where exactly that was. And they finally decided, I think the consensus is probably at the confluence of Fountain Creek and the Arkansas River, which puts it right in the middle of Pueblo. And even back in the 1850s, 1840s, it was supposedly been washed away in floods. So rat! So no bent stockade, original stockade. Well, I'm certainly disappointed that didn't get into to see that site, that the specific area identified in the book. However, inaccurately it was identified. But we did get our first glimpse at how Colorado has changed in the 60 years. Fort Carson's range obviously expanded, which for good or bad, which I think probably good, stopped the infill of housing. Fort Carson is really trying to be a good steward of the property and identifying these kind of archaeological sites and making efforts to identify and ultimately preserve them. So next, let's go to Cripple Creek. Let's look for the Altman mine and the Anaconda mine. Or, excuse me, towns. Let's look for the ghost town of Anaconda and the ghost town of Altman.